Nice to be joined in studio here by Connor Hughes, my colleague over at SNY. Of course, he's an NFL reporter for SNY, covers both the Jets and the Giants. I know you started before that, Connor, were with the Jets more so, but this year doing both. BT and I both a fan of your work. Figured to have you in on Football Friday to talk some football.
Thank you, guys. I appreciate it. This is fun. I've never been in here before.
You do a great job there. I remember I never met him. I sent you a DM. What, about a year or so ago?
Yeah, you guys were awesome, man.
I'm like, keep up the good work. He's just, you do solid work. So we need the real answers on a lot of questions here. We got a bunch. And listen, the Belichick, I'm going to put the Belichick aside for a moment. Okay. That's what we're discussing. Should the Jets make a play? They won't. I don't think they should. Sal thinks they should.
Well, can you confirm that there's no chance?
Well, I guess you could start with that.
That's true.
No chance, right?
Yeah, no, they're running it back with Robert and Hackett and all those guys.
Okay,
yeah, that's a confirmed thing. Yeah, that's
yeah. It's not personal. I do think he's a terrific human being. I think Robert Saleh is an awful head coach. I do, and I think he lost the team going back to the Mike White stuff, where there's been too many things where. I don't want to say lack of control, because I do think the players respect him, certainly to an extent, but I don't see much of a ceiling with him as a head coach. I'm sorry. Do you? Am I missing something here?
So I would say that it's a little alarming that we're now going into year 4 with him, and you can still have those questions. And you don't know, right? We don't know if he's an elite level head coach. We don't know if he's truly the CEO type that they wanted when they hired him, because they tried to go the CEO-ish with Todd Bowles, and they wanted the brilliant offensive mind with Adam Gase, and they went back to the CEO type and thought he was going to be a little bit more rah-rah like Rex was, but maybe a little bit more controlled, which is what they were looking for. But I don't necessarily know if I'm ready to go there yet, because I do think that Robert and Jeff Ulbrich, they deserve credit for the defense, which I believe is one of the better in the NFL. The offense has been terrible, but how much do you put on how much you can do without a quarterback? And when there was a quarterback there, we did see the offense work. We saw it with Mike White for a bit, so I think that is a testament. I don't think Mike LaFleur should have gotten fired, because things did get substantially worse once they brought in Nathaniel Hackett. But yeah, I do think it's probably a little alarming that we're sitting here now and you still can't say one way or another if he is an elite level coach. But look, they're going to give him a chance to run it back and see this thing through with Aaron Rodgers, for better or worse.
Who's making this decision? Because to me, it's reckless the way that the Jets are going to double down and go into it. I mean, I have my assumptions of who it is. Maybe you know better with your information. Is this Woody? Is this Joe Douglas? Who is deciding to bring the whole thing back with Robert Saleh and Aaron Rodgers?
Well, it's ownership. It is ownership deciding to run this one through, because ultimately, if the Jets let go of Robert Saleh, they were letting go of Joe Douglas. Like, you're not going to let Joe Douglas pick another head coach, right? I mean, this is the thing, is that...
So it was either both gone or both stayed.
I mean, think about this. This whole team is Joe Douglas's fingerprints.
Right.
I mean, you can't hang your hat, and I've gotten into discussions with this with Robert and with Joe and other people over there, that the days of being able to push blame onto anybody else, they're over. This isn't like you can say John Idzik, right? You can't say Mike McCagnon. There's very few leftovers. I think it's Quinnen Williams and Thomas Hennessy are the only leftovers from the Mike McCagnon regime. So this is Joe Douglas's handpicked quarterback in Zach Wilson, his handpicked players, his handpicked coaching staff. I mean, this was him. So if you're going to say, okay, this didn't work, it's very rare that you let a general manager with Joe Douglas's track record then pick it all over again. So this was Woody Johnson looking at this entire landscape and deciding, is it better to blow it all up now and restart it all now, or do you want to give these guys a chance to see it through? And in my opinion, there was mounting evidence that you probably should have started over. That would have been the right decision. I mean, I think there are legitimate questions with the entire offense that they got substantially worse after letting Mike LaFleur go in just about every statistical category. And I know what they push to. They'll push to they don't have anyone opposite Garrett Wilson. They'll push to the quarterbacking problem where they lost Aaron Rodgers.
Whose fault is that?
Correct. That's my argument with that.
That's what they used to push back?
Yeah,
memo to the Jets, come up with some more material. You picked all the guys.
That's my counter. That has been my counter consistently, is that you don't have a quarterback behind Aaron Rodgers because you chose to run it back with Zach Wilson. You don't have a receiver opposite Garrett Wilson because of your own mishaps. They drafted Denzel Mims in the second round. You drafted Elijah Moore in the second round. You went out and signed Corey Davis. You signed Allen Lazard. You signed McCall Hardman and then traded Elijah Moore. I mean, you did all of these things, and that's why you don't have, it's not, and again, like you can say theory and, their mindset or their plan was right. It was just flawed the way they saw it through. But still, it's your fault why you don't have these things, which is why I go back to, well, what is it? But their thing is, I think their thought process was, and I should say what their thought process was that let's run it back. Let's just we told you guys that we wanted to see this thing with Aaron Rodgers. That blew up 4 plays in. We're going to give you one more opportunity to see this through with Aaron, and if it doesn't work with Aaron next year, then everybody's going to be gone, and it'll be the blow up that everyone's looking for.
So that's Connor Hughes, of course. SNY must follow on Twitter. Jets and Giants, got a couple of Giant things for you as well. So let's boil it down to this, Connor. He's in studio with us here, BT and Sal on the Fan. If I said, who's the bigger asset or who's the better asset? Meaning, who's better at their job? Is it Douglas or is it Saleh?
Well, I that's a tough one. So I think there's probably it's one draft, and there's a lot more that kind of go against it. But I mean, Joe did go out there and put together a pretty freaking good draft class when you look at what he was able to do. And I'm not even talking about the big ones in Sauce Gardner and Garrett Wilson, because when you're picking that high in the draft, you should be able to find some really good players, and they did. It was Jermaine Johnson, who's now coming into his own and looking like a legitimate player there. It's finding Breece Hall in that same draft class, who's looking like a pretty good player there. Joe Tippmann the next year in the second round, looking like a pretty good player. Will McDonald, and again, we haven't seen Will McDonald.
Even if he's fine, it's the wrong pick.
I 110% agree with you. Yeah, I mean, look, you could say JSN should have been the pick there. Addison could have been the pick there. Zayfly, again, you want to talk about they want to blame we don't have a receiver. Well, you don't have there were options there for you to draft, man. You should have gone out there and get them. But I would say that Joe Douglas, even my criticisms of Joe Douglas, and he has made mistakes. The Zach Wilson pick, the Denzel Mims pick, the Mekhi Becton pick, some of his free agent signings. But you look at them, and I think with Joe, I can at least see the why. Mm-hmm. And it didn't work, right? But you can see the why. Laken Tomlinson has been a bad free agent signing, but they went and signed a guy who was a Pro Bowl player in San Francisco who was going to be in the exact same scheme because they brought San Francisco's offensive line coach over. That's, I think, if you even hindsight, that was a pretty good signing, right? Then you look at some of the guys that they had in the building who they signed, didn't work here, and they let go. Well, now they're working elsewhere. Why? So he has invested resources in the right places. He's made an effort. This wasn't like Mike McCagnon where it was like, dude, what are you doing? Like, how do you just ignore these spots? He's put the resources in the right places. He just hasn't invested the resources in the right way. And that, to me, is alarming. But at least with him, you can see the why. I don't always see the why with some of the things that.
So the answer is Joe. I would agree.
Yeah,
by the way.
I think honestly, and I've said this to some of my issues with the Jets right now, and a lot of it stems with somewhat with the players, but mostly with the staff. Is that I don't love this, and I said this on SNY. I don't love the culture of just consistent and incessant excuse making that seems to overrun the organization, and it's never. When Adam Gase was there, guys, and I know he was ridiculed and ripped apart. I remember having conversations with Adam over and over and over again, and he would, and that roster was, by Robert Saleh's own definition, expansion level. It was a bad team. Never did Adam, for all of his faults, he never blamed the players. He never blamed what Joe Douglas gave him. He constantly said, yeah, maybe these guys aren't the best, but I have to find a way to get my offense I have to find a way to get through to them. I have to find a way to make them see what I'm seeing. And yeah, it didn't work, and one of his failures was that he was never able to connect, but it was always the thumb. It was always, I need to figure this out. I just get the sense a lot of times with this team right now, and again, it's not just Robert. There's a lot going on there where it just feels like they constantly focus and hammer on who's not here, what they don't have, and what they still need, instead of trying to find a way to make it work with who is there. And that, to me, is the most alarming aspect of the Jets.
It's absolutely pathetic. BT and Sal on the Fan. We have Connor Hughes from SNY in studio here. We've talked about 10 minutes right now. We haven't mentioned Aaron Rodgers' name really in detail. Yeah. How much of this, because it just doesn't make any sense to me, Connor. If I'm the owner, I'm sitting back watching this team embarrass me year after year after year. I like Joe Douglas. I think he's more respectable than anything else that they've had prior. Yeah. However, the results are what they are. The team stinks, and there's always an excuse. Like you said, it's always something with them. Yeah. So if I'm the owner, I'm saying, what the hell's going on here? I'd look to either clean house, go hire a young, bright offensive mind, maybe draft a quarterback, or look to move up and take a quarterback. They're not. They're doubling it down. How much of this is because of the influence of Aaron Rodgers?
I don't think Aaron's sitting there. There was no, from Aaron Rodgers, there was no sitting down and saying, if you don't bring this regime back, I'm out. There was none of that.
He did back them publicly on the McAfee show.
And he does, because he does. He believes in them. Obviously he believes in Nathaniel Hackett. He believes in Joe Douglas. I'm sure he likes the fact that this staff seems and the organization seems to give him whatever he wants. I'm sure that's a benefit of it all. Wouldn't we all like that? But I think this was one of those things. He made his opinion clear, but he was not going to meddle, and he was not like Rodgers wasn't going to step in and say, I'm out. This was, and again, it's. I do believe that they are making the right move running it back. And the reasoning why I think they're making the right move running it back is because if they were to fire everyone and say, we're blowing this up, we're starting anew, right? You now know that Aaron Rodgers is coming back. You need to find a coach that, one, is willing to work with Aaron Rodgers. If they want to keep Nathaniel Hackett, but even if you're blowing, now you need to find an offensive coordinator. And also, it's a playoff mandate now because you have a team that's willing to win now. You see the quick trigger finger. Like it's almost like they're Woody's not sitting there and saying we're sticking with these guys through thick and thin forever. It is we set this up to see how it works with Aaron Rodgers. Aaron Rodgers went down after 4 plays. We're going to give you one opportunity this coming year, 2024, to see it through with Aaron Rodgers. And if it doesn't work, and Joe Douglas said this at his end-of-year press conference, Rodgers said this when he talked to us as well, and I think he probably said it on McAfee. I've lost track of everything that goes on there. They've made it clear that they know this is do or die. That if they don't do it this year, no matter who gets hurt, no matter who goes, they are going to blow it up, and then it will be a complete fresh start, likely without, again, if Aaron Rodgers struggles here, he's not going to be back next year. So it would be a brand new quarterback, likely top 10 draft pick, new GM, new head coach, and they are truly going to start from scratch and move on from this regime. But they're just willing to see this through. And I honestly, you think at the big pool of people that would want to get involved with this team and this coaching staff, it dwindles when you go, okay, you got to keep Aaron Rodgers. Okay, you got to find someone that works with him. Okay, it's got to be an offense that works with Aaron Rodgers. Okay, it dwindles a little bit. Okay, also, by the way, it's pretty much a win now. Season, it dwindles even more.
And the OC staying.
Yeah, exactly.
Well, that's why I think, outside of the OC, it's why I think Belichick would be a great fit because you really don't have a choice. They're trying to win now. You got Aaron Rodgers. Saleh's the worst coach in the league. Belichick's available, and it might be the one time ever that he's desperate enough to even consider coming to the Jets. To me, I don't know what he would do with Hackett necessarily, but you go into the season with Saleh, Hackett, Rodgers, or Belichick, Rodgers. Which one you going in with?
Yeah, and I think I would say Belichick. Yeah, but I think everyone would. But my counter to that, and I said this yesterday, is that Bill Belichick is, by just about every measure imaginable, he's the greatest coach to ever live in the NFL, right? I mean, I think if you want to go way back and talk about some of the other guys, okay, fine. But for the most part, and we can, again, get into the argument about Tom Brady, how much it's still – those first few Super Bowls that Tom Brady won, he was clutch down the stretch, but those were Bills defenses, Bills teams. Like Brady was almost game managed those first goals. And then Brady hit his stride almost in 7 when the Giants beat him, and then he became like this unbelievable next otherworldly quarterback. But still, Belichick is the greatest coach to ever live. He's sitting there, and there were all of these opportunities open, and he's been passed on him.
Yep.
And I want there's something there. That Arthur Blank sat with him on his yacht, looked across him in the face, and walked away and said, "Nah, I'm going to go with somebody else." There's something to that, and I don't know if it's that they think he got stale in New England. I don't know if there's the report that came out that said he was going to bring Matt Patricia as his defensive coordinator, Josh McDaniels back, that he's almost stuck in his ways. Like, no, what went wrong in New England? That wasn't me. Trust me. Let me run it back. And some people are like, no, we want to see a guy who's got a fresh start. Like when Coughlin came back to the Giants, and he was different than Jacksonville a little bit. And you see these guys that get fresh. Like Pete Carroll was different in Seattle. Like they re-energize and they change their method and they evolve. It's almost like Bill didn't evolve. And I there's usually something there. And if it seems so obvious and all of these teams out there are kind of saying, no, we're going to go with somebody else, I think there's something to it, with the exception of the Panthers, where they just had to find someone to take that job.
I agree with you. I would not do it. I want to go back to one bigger picture issue with the Jets. It's funny. A lot of times, and I know you get this as well on social media, what about ownership? Like we can tweet all day and do shows and have segments and debate, and scream, Rodgers, coach, GM, this, O-line, receivers, whatever. Ownership. I think Woody's a terrific person. I really do. I think he's a good guy. I think Woody Johnson's biggest issue is that he's got no connections. Anytime the Jets have a big decision to make, right? They lean on Charlie Casserly. Hey, Peyton, what do you think of Peyton? I don't care what Peyton Manning thinks about the Jets. I care what somebody inside the building who knows football, who's had success, who's got Woody's ear. I care what that person cares about the Jets. And I feel like Woody doesn't have that reliable voice or person to gravitate to in the building that's going to get him in the right direction. Is that unfair to say?
I think there's some. Like, I know Jaime, the team president, he recently took over a few years ago. He's a true football guy. Like, he really is, and he's got Woody's ear. There is something to that, but I mean, it's not every owner is going to be John Mara, who's a football lifer, or Jerry Jones, who's a football lifer. And I know Jerry's fallen off some, but still, I mean, the Cowboys are always good. Like they're never, like, very rarely are they just a bad team that's missing the playoffs 13 straight years. But the one credit I will end up kind of flipping that and giving Woody is that he realizes that it's not like he's out there trying to be something he's not. He brings in Again, he brought in the wrong people, but one of the big reasons why they went out there and got Joe is that this was a dude who cut his teeth from Ozzie Newsome in Baltimore, right? And then he had success in Philly with Howie Roseman, and he had basically a cup of coffee with the Bears. But like, this was your football guy, and Woody wasn't there, but Christopher Johnson was. Woody still signed off on it, and they gave full control of the team to Joe and was like, "You've seen how it works before. You've done it before. Go." Now, the one criticism of Woody is that I think there are times where it's like the shiny object that grabs your attention, and it's like, I need to have that. And I wonder if he still needs to – he's a little bit more hands-on than Christopher was. Christopher was very much like, Joe, it's your show, you go. And Woody is still, it's Joe's show, but maybe we do this, maybe we do that. So I think there is a little bit of that, but it's just the unfortunate – like that aspect of what you're saying, it's the unfortunate just reality of the Jets. Like, that's not Woody. Like, Woody's not the football lifer. He's not ignorant to it all, but, I mean, you're unfortunately – looking for something he's not, and the only way that changes is if he goes and sells the team, which isn't going to happen,
or hires the absolute right person, and
that's what they think they did with Joe, right? I mean, that's what they thought they did.
I like Joe. I do. I haven't given up on Joe. I've given up on Saleh. I haven't given up on Joe yet, totally. But
unfortunately, they're a package deal now because they're not going to let. Like, it's rare. It is rare that these two guys got an opportunity to pick another quarterback. Like when you whiff, like you did on Zach Wilson, and I don't care that he had to play his first year. It did not matter. This was going to be a problem whether he started or whether he didn't start.
So you don't think if he was drafted by a different team with better, you don't think you just don't think he could play?
No, there's two. I mean, it didn't work. Mike LaFleur was a hard coordinator. Like he grinded him. It was, dude, you messed up on this. You need to be like, he was hard. It was tough love.
Yep,
didn't work. Nathaniel Hackett was the coddler. It was like, don't worry, we got it. Robert Saleh even let's hold him. It's fine. That didn't work. Like, he has tantalizing talent, but there's something there that's just not clicking.
But I don't push back on the coaching tactics, but he never had the requisite pieces to win, and he's gone. I know they're going to get rid of him. What I was going to say was, like, if he's drafted by the Niners and he's got protection and he's got offensive schemes that are innovative and forward-thinking and skill guys, like, I know that's a good point about coaching him hard, although they've coddled him lately, and it's done. You don't think if he was drafted to a totally different situation with that skill set, he could have been a star?
The Niners, I think, I think you put Sam in there this weekend, the Niners are still going to go to the Super Bowl. Like, I think the Niners are just they're the outlier. I really don't.
Okay.
I really like. I mean, look, I don't think he would be the disaster that he was with the Jets those first couple of years. Like, I don't think it was going to be that bad, but I do think that. I don't see him ever reaching the potential of the number two. I think that his ceiling, I genuinely believe that Zach's ceiling was the spot duty starter that comes in and you hope that he can hold the fort down and he goes up to being a backup. He was never going to be a Pro Bowler. He's never going to be an All-Pro. And that's a miss of a draft. You picked him second overall. Like, and now, granted, probably the only saving grace for that is that every other quarterback drafted after Trevor Lawrence was bad as well. Like, Mac Jones is
Still
bad.
question marks about Lawrence
Fields,
as well.
and Fields probably is like, he came on a little bit late there, but it looks like they're going to go Caleb Williams. So, I mean, they're restarting there, and those guys see him every single day. So that tells you all you need to know. But yeah, I don't think he was ever going to be anything. No matter what. Wow.
Beat T and Sal on the Fan. We're in studio with Connor Hughes, covers the Jets and Giants for SNY. We'll get to the Giants in just a second here. Last one for me on the Jets, more about personnel. You mentioned that they're going all in this year. What are we looking at as far as Bryce Huff coming back? And then what do you expect them to do in the draft? I mean, you would assume it's going to be O-line or wide receiver. Clearly, they need both. So Huff, and then where do the Jets go with the draft?
Yeah, Huff's a fascinating one because I told him, like, on Baggy Day, I shook his hand. I was like, dude, I appreciate the honesty because he's probably the only player that was like, no, I'm taking the bag. Like, whoever offers me the most money does not matter. And good for him. You know what I mean? Because some guys yeah, we'll see. I'd love to be back. He's like, yeah, I'll be back if they pay me the most money. So I think the Jets, the biggest ball dropping by them was not offering that guy a contract in the middle of the season because you could have had him at a number that was far less than the number he's going to see on the open market as a 10-sack guy. And because I think they took a half a sack away from him on the finale. So I think as a double-digit sack guy playing 40% of the defensive snaps, he's going to get a monster deal. And somebody is going to pay him. And I just... The only option for the Jets to keep him, because they're going to make a contract. It's not like they're just going to let him walk. They'll make him a contract offer. He's just going to get overpaid. And their only option would be then to franchise tag him And everything we've heard from Joe Douglas is that that's not going to happen. They're not going to franchise tag him, so he's going to go. And part of that probably has to do with the fact they invested a first-round pick in Will McDonald, and you got to see the kid play. But we can debate that the whole time. As you have a proven guy who's a 10-sack guy with somebody that you're banking on upside. If it was me, I'd bring him back. I don't know how you let him go, but it doesn't seem like that's going to happen.
Number 2 receiver, and we'll start getting to these Giant issues as well. Number 2 receiver, opposite Garrett Wilson. Week 1 is which player? Trade, draft, who is it?
I think it's going to be. I'm going to go a little bit wild. I think it's going to be Calvin Ridley because the Jets are pretty high on him coming. So the only reason I say that is I think Mike Evans goes back to the Bucs. I think assuming that they work things out with Baker Mayfield. I don't think Adams gets traded anymore.
Yeah.
So Adams was the
stuff.
hot one. I don't think so. The Raiders did not make him available at all at the deadline. Like, he was not available. Like, it didn't happen. The fact that Antonio Pierce is coming back, the Raiders have never said they want to get rid of Adams. It was Adams would want out of Vegas. And now that he's back and it seems like they're going to try to make this not a rebuild, but kind of like a retool, and they think they can fix this thing relatively quick, I don't necessarily know if he's gone. And if Adams is available, it's Adams. I just doubt he's going to be available. Calvin Ridley was a guy that when he was being traded from the Falcons, the Jets were they loved him. They made calls. They were in on him. They wanted to make a deal. When they called him, it was right around the time the Falcons knew the gambling stuff was coming out. So I remember talking to people over at the Jets, and they were like, I don't think he's available. Like we want him. Like, we think he's available. They did their homework as far as seeing if the issues that he had with the coaching staff was that like a Calvin Ridley has budding, he can't be coached. Like, they did all their background homework.
Okay.
They checked every box. The problem with him was when they called the Falcons to try to get something done, the Falcons were like, yeah, he's not available. And it was because they didn't want to deal in bad faith. Basically, trade this guy for a second-round pick.
They should have, the idiots.
Yeah, really.
Trade him. Let that be the Jets' problem.
Yeah, seriously. They just didn't want him. They didn't want that. They didn't want to trade him. And then, like, basically, yeah, we're going to get a second-round pick. Then, surprise, he's suspended for a year. Yeah, like, they didn't want to do that. And then the Jaguars ended up getting on a deal. But if he's available, he's one I could see them because they like him. I think he'd be a good compliment. I think he would be what they're looking for as a receiver. T. Higgins, I think he's probably going to get tagged, so I don't think he's going to be there. Like, that's the thing is you look now at the list of receivers that could be there for the Jets and realize that list is going to be cut by 90% because a lot of these guys are going to come back. They're going to be this, that, the other thing. So it would be Adams, but if he's not available, I think it could be Calvin.
And the old line's got to be first round.
Got to be. They need. You're asking Joe to do in a few months here what he hasn't done in 5 years. That's like the concept that they're going to rebuild this offensive line like that. Just it.
He hasn't done it. Well, hold on. Let me push back a little. No, he hasn't done it, but let me push back about maybe.
Stinks. I mean, that may have even been a worse pick than Wilson.
Yeah.
Guy's got no heart, no motor. He thinks he's the best. He can't stay healthy. He's out of shape.
Yeah. No, he's gone. Titman, Vera Tucker, and a first round hit. I know he's got a hit. I get that. You do that right there. Boom. 60% O-line set.
Yeah, and
it's not undoable.
The first round pick's got a hit.
Yep.
And again, this is a general manager. I do think that Joe's solid, but he also picked Becton over Wirfs, and Wirfs a pretty good football player for the Buccaneers, and it's theoretically if they hit everything right, if like you said they go out there and say Vera Tucker now is your right tackle, right? Because it's harder to find tackles than it is guards. You make Vera Tucker your right tackle. You go out there, you draft a left tackle, boom, tackle set. Laken Tomlinson's better now because Tipton's year 2. You now actually have a left tackle next to him, and then all you have to do is sign a right guard, which theoretically guards are more available. But the Jets have signed guards before, and you've got Greg Van Roten who failed, and you had Laken Tomlinson who has failed. They've drafted offensive linemen before and signed offensive tackles before that have failed. By the way, Elijah Vera Tucker is an offensive lineman who tore his Achilles. I think about a basketball player like the Achilles death sentence because you can't jump anymore unless you're Durant. Like an offensive lineman's job is push. Like push off.
Yep.
Like that's not just, you can't just assume that Vera Tucker is just going to be the Vera Tucker that was a borderline Pro Bowl All-Pro player. Like, you can't just assume that he's coming up. So you now need not only to figure out left tackle, right tackle, and a legitimate depth piece at right guard behind Vera Tucker in case he's not the same, and also hope Titman improves because there was some up and down year there. I know the Jets believe in him, but there was some up and down there, just the same as JMS with the Giants. So I think there are. Theoretically, there's a path to do it. You can do it. Teams have done it before. But again, 5 years Joe's been this team's general manager, and he stood at the podium on his introductory press conference and said, we need to rebuild the trenches. We need to rebuild the offensive line. And we're sitting here now saying they need 3/5, 4/5 of their offensive line fixed. So it's
same thing.
Yeah, it's like I have my reservations that they're going to be able to do it this offseason. I do. It'd be fun to do. I'd like to cover a playoff run. That's a heck of a lot better for business, right? But, I mean, I just have my reservations that they're going to be able to do it.
Well, you still do cover the Giants. BT and Sal on the Fan talking with Connor Hughes, who works for SNY. Let's get to the Giants here. Not as much in-depth, obviously, as the Jets. Jets have many issues. Let's start, though, with the coaching stuff. What'd you make of the whole Dable, Wink Martindale, and where the Giants are at now currently with their coaching staff?
I found it very, very, very funny that the number of that story is not true. There's no backlash. There's no anything. There's no rift here. And now suddenly he gets fired, and now everybody and their uncle is saying, "Oh no, yeah, they actually did hate." It's like, dude, like this was always there. Like Jake, there are people in this business, guys, that they say something and their word is like, you don't. It's like
he's won.
Glazer's won. Like like this guy. Like anytime you have some dude who knows so much that he sits on it until a pregame show and then drops it, like. The dude knows what he's saying. Like he's not hearing this from I heard some wild theories that it was like the equipment manager saying this, they're getting it from the laundry kid. Dude, this is he's probably hearing it from the top of the top. Like this, he's not making this stuff up. So that blew my mind. But it's not just Pat Leonard's story that he ran in the Daily News. And Dan Duggan ran one right before him. I thought both of those stories were I used to work at the I thought I should have given them the same outlet shout out. Those two stories were so well sourced, and I thought they told both sides of the story very well. It wasn't blue shaded. It wasn't this is the Giants side. It was this is the side of who's left. This was the side of who's staying. And also these are all of the things that we've picked up on what's actually going inside. And some of those quotes that were dropped by specifically Leonard in there, it painted an environment that has built that you can tell when the Giants are winning games like they did 2 years ago. Yeah, you can look past it. You can look past being cursed out and in meetings and this and the crazy hotheadness because you're winning games. And at the end of the day, when clock hits zero and you win and everyone's happy and fans are happy, everyone's good. But when you lose, it really wears people down. And the Giants had, and you can check my phone. I'm not tight with Wink Martindale. I don't have his cell phone number. I don't talk to him every day. Like, here he's a golfer, so maybe I'll see him on a course someday. But, I don't know him from anything other than sitting in front of him in a press conference. He was a top-tier defensive coordinator you had in your building, and the working environment with Dable was so bad that he wanted out. He was like, I can't do this anymore. And it wouldn't surprise. There were other coaches, whether it was the stink eye that he gave the special teams coordinator, whether it was the assistants that have come out and spoke, that it's like there is something there that is alarming. And it is something there that needs to be addressed and changed. And just assuming that, Wink was a bad apple, these guys were bad apples, this one was bad, this wasn't really a problem. It was something that just kind of one squeaky wheel. No, this was enough where it was an issue inside their building that they need to fix. And I think there's more there than maybe what some people thought, and it was just hidden year one because they were winning.
Okay, so do you think that there's a chance, Connor Hughes with us in studio, by the way, BT and Sal, SNY, Twitter, of course, Jets and Giants, great coverage. Do you think that there's a chance that when it's all said and done, his volatility from a personality point of view ruins him, Dable?
So, yeah, I mean, I heard from stuff, like when some of this stuff came out, I was like, man, this is like not good. And I remember talking to people that knew that there were issues in Cleveland, like when he was the offensive coordinator there, the same volatility and heatedness in Cleveland. And some of the reasons, remember, Dable went through several coaching cycles before he got his job, that there were some of those issues that were turned up in those coaching cycles and coaching interviews, and they wanted him to address them, and he didn't address them overly well in some of those interviews, which is why those teams passed on him despite his success in Buffalo with their DVOA and what Josh Allen's done and all those things. And yeah, I think this is something that could deteriorate. I mean, it's very rare, and I don't think Kafka's like just some surefire pick to come back. I think there's there's not a 0% chance that he takes a lateral move. Like that's not completely incomprehensible. Like that's still a situation that could be out there. And when you have a coordinator that is, or a coach that loses all three coordinators and maybe two of which because they don't want to work with him anymore, that's a red flag. And I don't think it's so much so that he can't save it, because I do think that Brian Dable is a very good coach from a schematic standpoint. It does look. That team was 2-8. They very easily could have finished the season 2-15 and gone to the tank. Giants picking 1 or 2. They still fought for him. Them beating the Eagles final game of the season. That's noteworthy when the Giants had nothing to win.
We said that too. No, we said that 100%. In real time.
So guys still fight for him, and players still fight for him. And I think he did do a good job of sheltering the coaching drama from the locker room. So there was a clear divide. I think he did do those two things. But what Wink's absence and departure has shown is that there are things that need to change with Brian Dable if he wants to be a year-over-year consistent, successful head coach in the NFL. And I think he does need to change and adjust, and he's going to be given the opportunity to do it this year.
So That's good stuff, by the way.
Now, if he doesn't,
yeah.
then I think you're talking about Belichick. I think that's the Giants coach in 2025.
Well, that's where I wanted to go. Because the way you present it, and some people thought it was all Wink, like Wink trying to be, usurp power.
Yeah.
Okay,
I did. I mean,
you did think that. You did,
yeah.
and you weren't alone, by the way.
Right.
So now that we have an A to Z scouting report on the building, to me, this seems dangerous enough where I might call Belichick today and get ahead of this.
Yeah, I see. That's the thing. It's correct because he not only did. I mean, Bryant. Like there is something to say what he did last year. I mean, 2 years ago. I'm sorry, not this
right.
last year was bad. He took a team that was terrible to the playoffs and won a playoff game with no talent. Like that team. I remember watching that team in training camp, and I talked to my boss at SNY and was like, I'm basically going to be with the Jets every day because this team's going to win 3 games. Like this team stinks. And like the fact that he had them playing the way that they did and got it, that is noteworthy. And you can't just constantly keep firing guys like they did with Ben McAdoo, like they did with Joe Judge. Like you can't keep doing that. So they are making the 100% right decision to run it back with them next year. Like he has, honestly, you've seen more from Dable than you have Robert Saleh to justify coming back.
Question.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
But I think that my concern is that if things go south next year and he doesn't change, what could happen? You know what I mean? Because now the covers have been pulled up where everyone was tucked in and hidden, and it was, again, they won year 1, so you didn't hear anything. Things went through year 2, you were fine. Year 3, the covers were pulled off. And it was, again, the story from Dan, the story from Pat. Like that showed a lot of what was going on there. Whether you want to pretend it didn't happen, I know some fans don't want to know, but it's the truth. That is the truth. Those guys are 2 damn good reporters. Like they uncovered a lot of that stuff. And the fact that these guys were willing to talk about it in year 2 when things started going south and they still finished strong, if they struggle again next year because Barkley's gone, Daniel Jones isn't the quarterback that they paid, all those things, maybe Shane doesn't hit home runs in the draft, and they struggle again with another hard schedule and a very hard division, I do worry about what's it going to look like going down the stretch. And will Mara want to say this is too much? Because the one thing he doesn't handle is being embarrassed. Mm-hmm. He does not handle being embarrassed at all. He doesn't like it. It's the Giants' pride. It's what the building means. It's what the logo means. All that. He doesn't handle being embarrassed. And if he says, you know what, thanks for the 3 years, it's too much, we're going to restart this thing. And if he does go that route and Belichick sits out a year, that's the one where, to me, you're talking about Jets. I mean, that's the one where Belichick comes home to the Giants. It just seems like something they would be willing to do if it, again, not this year, but 2025.
BT and Sal on the Fan in studio with Connor Hughes, covers the Jets and Giants for SNY. Last one for you, Connor. The Kayvon Thibodeau stuff here recently. Did you see what his comments?
Yeah.
I saw the headline initially, then saw the actual comments. I really didn't think there was much to it. But your thoughts on not only his comments, but also what it means inside that locker room as it pertains to Saquon Barkley.
Saquon's a really well-respected player, and players want players that get paid. So I get it. But from a general manager perspective, Joe Shane did it right. Mm-hmm. Like, because he paid Daniel Jones and because he tagged Saquon Barkley, the Giants had the ability, and I know their season did not go the way that it did the year before, but when you look at that team on paper, they were better at receiver because they had the financial resources to go out there and add some players. They were better at tight end with Darren Waller because they had the means to go out there and add some players. They were better overall because by paying the quarterback and spacing out that cap hit and tagging Saquon Barkley and not having the $40 or whatever $1 million cap hit it was going to be to have Daniel Jones playing on the tag, they had the financial resources to round out the roster. So he played it right. And by the way, Saquon Barkley did not run for 1,000 yards. He was injured again. And now you're going into a season like, he played it. I'm sorry. Like, if Saquon Barkley was a pass rusher or if Saquon Barkley was a receiver or Saquon Barkley was a quarterback, he would have been paid. I think what Joe Shane has shown us, and I think that it's smart team building, is that he just does not believe that running back is a valuable position that you need to invest significant resources in. So if Saquon Barkley wants to remain with a Giant, that's fine, but it's going to be on Joe Shane's terms. Joe Shane is going to put out the contract, and Joe Shane's going to say, this is what I'm willing to pay the running back. And if you want to take it, great. If you want to find better elsewhere, you can go find better elsewhere. And that's just now, from Shane's perspective, if you want to take that stance, that's totally fine with me. But remember, the locker room, like you said, they do value Saquon Barkley. Saquon Barkley is still this offense's best player. So if you're going to let him go and not pay him, you need to be able to hit on picks in the draft, and you need to be able to hit on your signings in free agency to be able to fill that void. Because if you let him go and suddenly the offense is a disaster, you're going to have people saying Saquon's running for 1,300 yards with the Eagles. Correct. And he's running for 1,400 yards with the Eagles. You're going to say, well, he could have been with us. Why'd we let him go? You know what I mean?
Yeah.
But again, it's Kayvon. I get it because it's a player. And players don't care. I remember Darius Slayton said the same thing. Like, players don't live in the world of salary cap. Players live in the world of maximize my worth, like Bryce Huff, and get the most money that I can possibly get, right? And the Giants are operating in the world of we need to field the best team we can possibly field. And they fielded a better team last year than the team that went to the playoffs the year before. They just didn't get the bounces that went their way. And they did that because they had money to play with, because they paid Jones to space out his cap hit and get out of what that franchise tag would have been. And they franchise tag Barkley.
And it just stinks because Barkley's a perfect Giant. This is the whole problem with taking a running back number 2 overall.
Yes,
They set him up, get him, and set him up for disaster. Barkley's great. He means a lot to the Giants. But obviously his worth at that position.
I have a crazy story about that draft too. If you want that one, about taking him second overall.
Okay.
I know we have time. Yeah. So it was. I remember talking to Mike McCagnon about it, because you remember the Jets were drafting 3.
Oh, of course, yeah.
And it was a lot of people were debating that 1 and 2. Like, you knew Browns were going quarterback. You just know it was Sam or Baker.
Yeah.
Were the Giants going to go quarterback as well? Because that was when Eli was going down. And I remember talking to Mike, because Mike traded from, I think, 6 to 3. And I said to him, like, dude, like, why did you not?
Was that with the Colts? He traded with the Colts, right?
Yeah. Went up to 3.
Yep.
And I remember saying, like, dude, like, weren't you nervous? Like, that the Giants were going to go quarterback, and suddenly you're landing the number 3, which would have been Josh Rosen, because after drafting Hackenberg, they weren't going to go with a developmental project like Allen again. It was like, he goes, no, because we had our sources that said the Giants were so locked in on Barkley at number 2. And I was like, well, like, I have sources too. Anytime you break a story, there's always like that slight hesitation, like, is this person lying to me?
Yep.
You know what I mean? Like, I was like, are you worried?
Right.
He goes, I wasn't worried until the morning of the draft happened and we got word that it wasn't Sam going 1, that Baker was going 1. Because, like, everyone was convinced Sam was going 1 to the point where when Sam took his visit to the Jets, Christopher Johnson was talking to him about where to live in Cleveland.
So the Jets thought they were getting Baker?
They thought they were getting Baker at 3. So
they traded up specifically for him, or just one or the other?
No, they thought they were getting Baker. They had Sam was their number 1 quarterback. That they thought they were getting Baker. They thought they were getting Baker. It was Sam 1, Barkley 2, Baker 3. So he goes, I was like, did you ever get worried? He goes, the only time I got worried was when we got word in the morning that it was going to be Baker 1. He goes, because I knew that the only person that loved Sam more than anyone in the world was John Elway. And he was with the Broncos. He goes, and I was petrified that John was going to call the Giants at number 2 and offer the house for number 2 in order to get Sam Darnold. And I was like, really? He goes, and I found out, he goes, after the fact, I saw John wherever. And he goes, I said to him, I was like, I was surprised you didn't do that. Like, I really thought you were going to try to jump us. They did. Dave wouldn't answer the phone. Dave was so locked in on number 2 that he wouldn't answer the phone. Yeah. So Dave was like, when Dave said, Dave said at his press conference, when Dave said at his postgame press conference, they didn't even take calls. They ran it up to get Barkley. He was not lying. Like, he was dead accurate. Like, he would not answer the phone. And the Broncos were willing to come up to number 2 to get up. They wanted Darnold.
Has that been out there before?
Yeah, I talked about it before. Like, I don't know. Like,
he not answer the phone.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
I mean, we've always ripped him for saying not only
and, like,
do you
he could have moved back, because I think it was that Quentin Nelson. I think was in that draft. He could have gone back and done Quentin Nelson.
Not only do you not take a running back there, trade down.
You could have everything in the world.
Wow,
that's a great story.
It was crazy. I was like, on that, man. That's a good story.
All right, thanks, Connor. We appreciate your time, man. We'll be following along. Yeah, you can follow him on Twitter at Connor J. Hughes on Twitter. Works for SNY, of course, both Jets and Giants. I'm sure there'll be plenty of storylines for both these teams moving forward. We appreciate you taking the time. You got to read here, BC?
I do, yeah. Really good job, Connor.
Thank you, man. I appreciate it. Thank you.
Awesome first spot with us here on the show. Really well done.